plane glided through the afternoon sky, its engines humming smoothly as it cruised above the clouds. Inside the business class cabin, the mood was calm, filled with the quiet rustle of newspapers, the muted tap of laptop keys, and the occasional clink of glasses. At seat 3A sat a poised young woman, dressed in an elegant black blazer over a deep burgundy blouse. Her hair was neatly pulled into a high bun, and a discreet pair of pearl earrings adorned her ears. She glanced at the in-flight magazine, but her attention was elsewhere, her mind preoccupied with the upcoming meeting she had flown across the country to attend. Her name was Amara Johnson, and she was no ordinary passenger. At just 34, she was the Chief Human Resources Officer for North Sky Airlines, the very airline she was now flying with. Known across the industry for her composure, integrity, and modern approach to corporate culture, Amara was both respected and feared in the executive world. But today, she wasn't traveling as an executive. Her trip was unofficial, personal, a quiet visit to her aging grandmother in Seattle. She'd chosen not to notify the crew of her title or position. She wanted to be treated like any other customer and quietly observe how the airline's frontline staff behaved in real situations. As the plane reached cruising altitude, a flight attendant began moving down the aisle. Her name tag read Lauren, and she walked with the confidence of someone who had done this job for years. With her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun and her crisp uniform spotless, she looked every bit the professional, at least at first glance. But the moment Lauren reached row 3, something shifted. She gave Amara a quick, dismissive glance, then stopped and frowned. "Ma'am," she said sharply, "you're in the wrong seat. This is business class." Amara blinked, startled. "Yes," she replied calmly. 3A. It's on my boarding pass." Lauren didn't even look at it. "I said this is business class," she repeated, her voice slightly louder now, drawing glances from nearby passengers. "I'm aware," Amara responded, reaching into her handbag. "Here, my boarding pass." But Lauren waved her off. "I don't need to see that. You need to move. Now." There was a pause. Amara slowly lowered her boarding pass, realizing that this was not a misunderstanding, it was a challenge. Around them, passengers watched silently, some pretending not to listen, others openly staring. Amara's tone remained level. "I'm not moving. I booked this seat. If there's a problem, please call the cabin supervisor." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Don't raise your voice at me," she snapped, though Amara had done no such thing. "We have rules. You need to comply or face consequences." The tension thickened in the cabin. A man 2 rows back muttered under his breath, "She's clearly in the right seat." Another woman shook her head, frowning at Lauren's behavior. Amara took a slow breath. Her instincts as an HR professional kicked in. She would not escalate. She would document. Quietly, she took out her phone, opened the voice memo app, and began recording. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply waited, poised, composed, and calm. But inside, she was already making mental notes. She had come here for a personal visit. But this flight was about to change everything. Lauren stood stiffly in the aisle, clearly expecting Amara to comply. When the young woman didn't move, the flight attendant's tone shifted from cold to confrontational. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Lauren said sharply, her finger now pointed just inches from Amara's face. "If you don't get up, I'll have security meet you when we land. This is your final warning." A hush fell over the business class cabin. Several passengers were now openly watching, their brows furrowed, jaws tight. Amara, still seated in 3A, met Lauren's stare evenly, her voice calm and even. "I've shown you my boarding pass. You haven't even looked at it," she said. "I am in the correct seat. I will not be moving." From behind Lauren, a young male flight attendant hesitated before stepping forward. He glanced at Amara, then at Lauren. "Hey, Lauren, maybe we should check the manifest." Lauren silenced him with a look. "I said I've got this." Amara's fingers tightened slightly around her phone, which she had subtly tilted upward. It was still recording. Every word, every pause, every escalation. She kept her face neutral, resisting the urge to glance around at the dozen or so pairs of eyes now glued to the standoff. She had dealt with hundreds of workplace conflicts in her career. She had led company-wide investigations, overhauled harassment policies, and conducted sensitivity training sessions that changed entire divisions. But never had she been on the receiving end of such blatant disrespect, and never in such a public and humiliating setting. Lauren folded her arms. "You don't belong up here," she muttered, just low enough that only those nearest could hear, but the tone was unmistakable, dismissive, accusatory, biased. Amara's heart pounded, but her voice remained measured. "If you continue speaking to me in this tone, I will report you. I ask that you behave professionally." The older woman sitting behind Amara leaned forward. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Lauren. "I saw her board. She came in with the rest of us. That seat is hers." Lauren's face flushed. "Mind your business, ma'am." That was the final straw. Amara slowly stood, not because she was giving in, but because she was reclaiming her agency. She looked Lauren straight in the eye and said, "My name is Amara Johnson. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer for this airline. You are being recorded, and I am documenting every moment of this exchange." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Lauren's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Her posture stiffened, but the fight drained from her face. The murmurs from the other passengers grew louder now, like ripples through still water. One man, seated in 2C, pulled out his own phone and began filming. "About time someone called this out," he said quietly. Amara sat back down slowly. "Please fetch the cabin supervisor," she said. "Now." Lauren hesitated, her face pale, then turned abruptly and walked briskly toward the front of the plane. As she disappeared behind the curtain, Amara let out the slowest of exhales. She hadn't planned to reveal her identity, but she also hadn't planned to be publicly humiliated. Now, this wasn't just a personal moment, it was about accountability, and the wheels of that accountability were already turning. After Lauren disappeared behind the curtain, the energy in the cabin remained charged. No one returned to their reading or emails. The moment had shifted the atmosphere from peaceful to tense, and all eyes occasionally drifted toward Amara, who now sat quietly in her seat, her hands resting neatly on her lap. Across the aisle, a man in a navy blue suit leaned slightly toward her. "Ma'am," he said in a hushed voice, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. That was unacceptable." Amara gave him a brief, appreciative nod. "Thank you," she said softly, still composed. "It happens more often than it should." He looked at her with surprise. "To you? To people who look like me?" His mouth parted slightly, but he said nothing more, just nodded and leaned back in his seat, thoughtful. From the front of the plane, the curtain rustled. A woman with short silver hair stepped through, the cabin supervisor, name tag reading M. Ellis. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes quickly scanned the passengers before settling on Amara. "Miss Johnson?" she asked. "Yes." "My apologies. May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Amara gestured toward the empty seat beside her. "We can speak here. I'm fine." The supervisor glanced around and noticed several passengers watching closely. She hesitated, then took the seat. "I was just informed there was an issue." "There was," Amara replied. "One of your flight attendants verbally harassed me. She refused to check my boarding pass, accused me of sitting in the wrong cabin, and threatened to remove me without cause. I have the entire exchange recorded." The supervisor's eyes widened just slightly. "I see. I'll need to." "I'm not here to make a scene," Amara interrupted calmly, "but I won't tolerate being humiliated, not in front of this many witnesses, and certainly not by a staff member who represents our brand." Ellis blinked. "Our brand?" Amara gave a small smile. "I'm not just a passenger. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for North Sky Airlines, and I boarded this flight as a customer to visit family, not to audit your crew, but unfortunately I was forced into that role." The cabin supervisor straightened. Her demeanor shifted subtly, becoming more attentive, more cautious. "Understood," she said. "I deeply apologize for what happened. I will handle this personally and file an incident report. May I ask, do you wish to file a formal complaint now or wait until we land?" Amara glanced out the window. The clouds below were cottony and endless. "I'll wait until we land," she said, "but I expect the flight data and crew notes to be preserved, and I'd like a written acknowledgement that this interaction is on record." "Of course," Ellis replied. She stood. "Is there anything else I can offer you to make you more comfortable?" Amara looked at her, then at the watching passengers. "An apology," she said, "from Lauren, in person." Ellis hesitated. "I'll speak with her." With that, she returned to the front of the cabin, disappearing behind the curtain again. Amara leaned back in her seat, took a deep breath, and shut her eyes for a moment. This wasn't how her day was supposed to go. But now that it had taken this turn, she wasn't going to walk away silently. She was a believer in second chances, in coaching and reform. But she was also a believer in consequences, especially when people in positions of power forgot their responsibility to treat others with dignity. She opened her eyes again, took out her phone, and began typing notes. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the culture she was hired to change and the cracks that had just revealed themselves at 30,000 feet. Behind the thick navy curtain separating the business cabin from the galley, Lauren stood stiffly, her arms crossed and jaw tight. The galley, once a place of routine and comfort for her after years of service, now felt unsteady, like the floor itself might shift beneath her. The cabin supervisor, Ellis, closed the curtain behind her and faced Lauren with a measured expression. "We need to talk," she said. Lauren rolled her eyes. She was rude. She had an attitude from the start. "I was just trying to enforce the rules." "She wasn't in the wrong seat," Ellis replied. "Her boarding pass confirmed it, and she is the Chief Human Resources Officer for the airline." Lauren's face drained of color. "She what?" "You heard me," Ellis said firmly. "You verbally accosted a senior executive of this company. You humiliated her publicly. And more than that, Lauren, you didn't even bother to check her credentials before escalating." Lauren stepped back, shaking her head slightly. "I didn't know. She didn't look like." She stopped herself. Ellis didn't blink. "Didn't look like what?" There was silence. "You need to go back out there," Ellis said. "You need to apologize to her, sincerely." Lauren's pride surged. "But she's recording everything. She's trying to get me fired." "She didn't ask for anyone to be fired," Ellis cut in. "She asked for an apology. That's the least you can do." "I'm not going out there like some criminal," Lauren hissed. "She could have just told me who she was." Ellis gave her a hard stare. "She didn't owe you anything. What she expected, what every passenger expects, is respect and professionalism, neither of which you gave her." Lauren looked away, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She had never been disciplined in her 12 years with the airline. She had outlasted 3 managers, trained dozens of junior crew members, and taken pride in being firm but fair. But deep down, she knew this was different. This wasn't firm, this wasn't fair, and it wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Meanwhile, in seat 3A, Amara was quietly typing notes into her phone, a log of everything that had happened, from the moment Lauren first approached her to the interaction with the supervisor. She knew the procedures. She knew the chain of command. And she knew how hard it was to change culture from the inside when incidents like this were allowed to slip through the cracks. She wasn't vengeful, but she wasn't passive either. Across the aisle, the man in the navy blue suit leaned over again. "You handled that better than most would," he said. "I admire your calm." Amara gave a small nod. "Calm doesn't mean unaffected," he smiled faintly. "No, I suppose not." The curtain rustled. Lauren appeared, her hands clasped awkwardly in front of her. Her face was taut, her posture slightly hunched, a noticeable shift from the authority she had wielded earlier. She approached Amara's seat slowly. "I just wanted to say, I apologize," Lauren said, voice stiff and rehearsed, "for the misunderstanding." Amara looked up, locking eyes with her. "Do you understand what you're apologizing for?" Lauren blinked. For assuming. For speaking to me like I didn't belong," Amara added quietly. "For making assumptions based on appearances, for threatening to remove a paying customer without cause." Lauren's face twitched. She swallowed. "Yes, for all of that." Amara nodded slowly. "Thank you." The apology had been extracted, but it wasn't sincere. That much was clear. Still, she let it be, for now. As Lauren walked back to the galley, whispers rippled again through the cabin, but this time, they weren't about Amara. They were about Lauren. And the realization that not every uniform on this plane came with authority that could go unchecked. The remainder of the flight passed in a strange, tense quiet. Lauren stayed mostly out of sight, only reappearing briefly to assist with routine duties near the back of the plane. Other flight attendants had picked up the slack in the business class cabin, and while no one openly spoke of the incident, it lingered in the air like static. Amara kept to herself, reviewing her notes, organizing her documentation, and occasionally glancing out the window as the coastline of Seattle came into view. The descent was smooth, but her mind was anything but. She had faced bias before, in boardrooms, interviews, even at leadership retreats. But there was something about this confrontation, about being judged and publicly disrespected on her own company's aircraft, that struck deeper. It wasn't just the insult. It was the culture behind it. The quiet permission that allowed someone like Lauren to speak that way, unchecked, until now. When the aircraft touched down, the landing gear thudded softly against the runway. A few passengers clapped politely, others resumed gathering their things. But all eyes subtly returned to Amara. As the plane taxied to the gate, the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Seattle. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for choosing North Sky Airlines. We wish you a pleasant stay." Amara didn't move yet. She waited, letting the crowd in front of her file out. Several passengers stopped by her seat on the way past, offering quiet nods, smiles, a whispered "good luck" or "you handled that beautifully." One woman, clearly shaken, leaned in and said, "Thank you for standing your ground. That was brave." Amara simply nodded in acknowledgement, humbled but focused. As the aisle cleared, the cabin supervisor, Ellis, returned to her seat near the galley and waited. Amara rose, collected her things, and approached her. "Thank you," Ellis said quietly. "I've made the necessary notations. The incident will be reported to both in-flight operations and HR." "I'll be handling it from the HR side," Amara replied, "and I'll need access to any internal reports, passenger statements, and crew logs related to this flight." Ellis hesitated. "Understood. I'll make sure they're forwarded." Amara turned to leave but paused. "Ellis?" she said. "Yes?" "You did the right thing up there. I appreciate how you handled it, even if your colleague didn't." The supervisor's face softened. "Thank you. I just hope this turns into something constructive." "It will," Amara said, "one way or another." She exited the plane with calm, measured steps, stepping into the jet bridge and walking with the quiet strength of someone used to handling storms. Meanwhile, back on board, Lauren slumped in her jump seat as the last few passengers disembarked. Her mind was racing, not with regret but with fear. 12 years, hundreds of flights, thousands of passengers, and now one moment, one judgmental mistake, threatened to erase all of it. But part of her knew it wasn't just one moment. There had been others. Moments when she'd spoken too sharply, assumed too much, dismissed someone too quickly, and now someone had finally pushed back. Someone with power. Real power. She pulled out her phone and stared at it, but she couldn't bring herself to check her messages. She had a sick feeling that the fallout had already begun. And this time, there would be no hiding behind seniority. No union rep could undo what had just happened in Seat 3A. The next morning, Lauren sat at her kitchen table in silence, her untouched coffee slowly going cold. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with emails and notifications, but she ignored most of them, until one subject line stood out. "Urgent, mandatory HR debrief, Flight 2271. She clicked it with a trembling hand. "Dear Miss Carter, you are required to attend a mandatory HR debrief regarding the incident that occurred during Flight 2271 on April 3rd. Please report to North Sky headquarters by 3 p.m. today. Failure to comply may result in immediate administrative leave. Office of Employee Relations, North Sky Airlines." Lauren pushed the phone away like it had burned her. She had known this was coming. The moment she saw Amara's face shift from silent passenger to corporate authority, she had known. But still, it stung. She thought about calling someone, a supervisor, a friend, even the union rep, but she didn't. Deep down, she knew this wasn't a misunderstanding she could talk her way out of. This wasn't like that time with the passenger who'd refused to wear a seatbelt, or the mother who insisted on letting her child run in the aisle. This was different. This time, she was the one who had crossed the line, and everyone had seen it. Meanwhile, in a sleek glass office high above the city, Amara sat with her legal and HR compliance team. The incident report from the cabin supervisor had been submitted, along with a dozen passenger statements, all confirming Lauren's tone, words, and behavior. "We've received multiple videos," one HR associate reported. "Some passengers filmed the exchange. It's already circulating on internal employee forums." Amara gave a slow nod. "I expected that." She glanced at the timeline displayed on the screen, the key events logged minute by minute. Her voice remained professional, but her eyes carried the weight of something personal. We need to move quickly, and we need to be transparent. If we don't handle this with integrity, it will undo all the trust we've worked so hard to build. Another executive leaned forward. How do you want to proceed? Amara leaned back slightly. This isn't just about discipline, she said. It's about sending a message. We've trained our staff in bias awareness, cultural sensitivity, customer dignity, but training only matters if violations have consequences. There was a pause in the room. Then Amara continued, her voice steady. I want Lauren Carter placed on immediate administrative leave, full investigation, and if the findings match what we already have, she exhaled, termination. A quiet murmur of agreement circled the room. But we'll give her a chance to speak, she added. A formal meeting, on record. At 3 p.m. sharp, Lauren walked through the glass doors of North Sky headquarters. Her uniform was pressed, her hair done, her expression strained but composed. She was ushered into a windowed conference room where Amara sat at the head of the table, now in a tailored navy suit, no longer just a passenger, but the final voice in what would come next. Lauren swallowed hard. I didn't know who you were, she said, voice tight. You didn't have to, Amara replied. Respect isn't earned by title, it's expected by default. Lauren lowered her eyes. The meeting had only just begun, but the verdict was already in motion. And for the first time in Lauren's long career, she felt something she wasn't used to feeling. Accountability. The conference room remained still, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the central air system. Lauren sat stiffly in the chair across from Amara, flanked by a union representative on her left and the director of flight operations on her right. On the other end, Amara was supported by 2 HR compliance officers and a legal advisor. Every word spoken was being transcribed. Every gesture watched. Amara didn't open the meeting with anger. She opened it with facts. Carter, the purpose of this meeting is to formally address your conduct on Flight 2271. We have reviewed reports from multiple passengers, cabin crew, and a direct recording of the interaction between you and myself. You will have the opportunity to speak. But understand, this is not an informal conversation. It is a disciplinary hearing. Lauren nodded slightly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. One of the HR officers played the audio recording from Amara's phone. Lauren's voice came through clear, accusatory, dismissive, and commanding, each word echoing through the room like a drumbeat of evidence. When the recording ended, silence returned like a heavy curtain falling on a stage. Amara looked across the table. Do you have anything you'd like to say? She asked. Lauren cleared her throat. Her voice was quieter now. I misjudged the situation. I assumed you were in the wrong seat. I didn't handle it well. That much is clear, Amara replied. Lauren hesitated. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to be biased. But you were, Amara said. And not just in your assumptions, but in the tone you used. The refusal to check my boarding pass, the public confrontation, the threat of removal. You escalated without reason and in front of a cabin full of witnesses. Lauren looked down. Zach, this isn't the first time your behavior has raised concern, the director of flight operations added, flipping through a file. We've had prior reports of similar incidents, mostly passengers of color. Nothing escalated to this level, but the pattern is troubling. Lauren's eyes widened. Those were misunderstandings. Maybe, Amara said, voice still calm, but enough misunderstandings create a reality, and the culture we build in the sky reflects who we are as a company on the ground. The room sat in silence again. Amara leaned forward. I didn't want this meeting. I didn't wake up that morning planning to reveal my role or to discipline anyone. But I can't ignore what happened. You humiliated a passenger, not knowing that she had the power to hold you accountable. But what if I wasn't who I am? What if I were just a young black woman flying home to see her family? Lauren's voice broke. I'm sorry. Amara's eyes didn't waver. It's not me you owe that to. It's every passenger you treated differently without even realizing it. Then she closed the file in front of her. This concludes the hearing. 3 days later, Lauren received a certified letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Notice of termination. Miss Carter, following the investigation into your conduct aboard Flight 2271 and the findings reviewed during your disciplinary hearing, North Sky Airlines has determined that your actions violated the company's code of conduct and our policies on non-discrimination and professional conduct. Effective immediately, your employment with North Sky Airlines is terminated. You are no longer authorized to represent or perform duties on behalf of the company. North Sky HR Compliance Division. She sat there for a long while, the letter on her lap, the sun beginning to fade through the window behind her. There would be no appeal, no second chance. She had made her choices in the aisle of that aircraft, and now she had to live with them. Elsewhere, Amara stood before a room of newly hired flight attendants, leading a workshop on bias in customer interactions. She had chosen to turn the incident into a learning opportunity, turning experience into change. On a screen behind her, slides played with phrases like dignity over dominance, respect starts with perception, check your assumptions at 30,000 feet. She paused to let those ideas land. In this job, she said to the room, you'll meet people from every walk of life. Some will challenge you, some will confuse you, but your job isn't to judge, it's to serve, with fairness, with grace, and with humanity. The trainees nodded. Some took notes, others just listened, wide-eyed. Amara glanced at the clock. Time to wrap up. She smiled gently. And remember, you never know who's sitting in seat 3A.